Will Klay Thompson ever be the same once returning from injury? Let's get into this.
Dosage. Oh yeah, I work with the medics. I'm about to get you injected. I got a couple connections so I can get you prosthetic.
Quickly before we get the video started, if you guys enjoy this video and want to see more NBA content just like this one, hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. Anyways, back to the video. Klay Thompson has accomplished so much in his young NBA career. He's a 5-time NBA All-Star, he won 3 NBA championships, had some crazy moments not only in the playoffs but also in the NBA Finals, proved the ability to not only play in the playoffs very effectively but also play in the NBA Finals very effectively. Overall, Klay Thompson has just accomplished so much in his young NBA career. And the first thing that most people think of when they talk about Klay Thompson is just one of the best shooters in the NBA, probably the best shooter right behind Steph Curry. But after all the success that Klay had in his early NBA career, the injuries started to come in. Back in the 2019-2020 NBA season in the NBA Finals against the Toronto Raptors, Klay Thompson went down with a torn ACL. And just as Klay was finally recovering from his torn ACL injury that he suffered in the finals, then in November of 2020, when Klay was just in an open workout, he actually tore his Achilles. So basically, Klay went through back-to-back terrible injuries, in an ACL and an Achilles injury, which is just absolutely brutal. But what made Klay so special before all these injuries? Why was he not only able to be a 5-time NBA All-Star, but also win 3 NBA championships and make it to the finals and just have so much success? What made him so special? Well, of course, first let's start with his 3-point shooting ability. As I mentioned before in the video, and probably basically everybody watching this video already knows, Klay is probably one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA. In terms of his catch and shoot 3-point jump shot, obviously it's extremely elite. He's great at coming off some down screens and just coming off screens in general for a catch and shoot 3-point shot and just moving very well offensively. But besides just catch and shoot 3-point shots, something that in my opinion a lot of people don't necessarily give him enough credit for is his ability to create for himself from that 3-point range. He has the ability to cross over into a 3-point jump shot, sidestep, step back. It's just we don't see him use it that often because he doesn't necessarily need to. And he mostly just works in the flow of the Warriors offense, which is just a lot of catch and shoot 3-point shots. But of course he does have the ability to create for himself from that 3-point range. But besides just his 3-point shooting ability, in terms of his mid-range shooting ability, of course it's also very elite. Has the ability to catch and shoot from that mid-range area, has a very good pull-up mid-range jump shot, of course has the ability to cross over, sidestep, step back, has all of that within his mid-range game. Another thing that he has within his game is that post turnaround fadeaway, which I mentioned in a lot of my videos, but I think it's very important for a superstar player to have that within their game. It just makes them so much more efficient as well as help their team out, obviously, by being more efficient. Also, Klay somewhat has a floater within his game. Similar to a lot of other things in his offensive game, he doesn't necessarily use it that often, but has the ability to put up that floater, and has a pretty efficient one at that. But driving all the way to the basket, Klay certainly had the ability to dunk over players once getting there. We've seen it from time to time. He wasn't necessarily the most athletic player in the league, but he certainly had the ability and athleticism to dunk over players at times. But mostly what Klay does once he got all the way to the basket was just finish around the defender with crafty layups. He certainly finished most of his layups with his right hand and was certainly right-handed dominant, but certainly also had the ability to finish with either hand and certainly had the ability to finish with his left hand. So basically offensively what Klay was a fantastic catch and shoot 3-point shooter, but also had the ability to do some other things. But what made Klay so special wasn't only how great of a shooter he was and how great of a player he was offensively, but defensively also Klay was fantastic. Klay always guarded the opposing team's best player each and every night and probably did as good of a job as you possibly could on whatever player he was defending. Besides his great on-ball defense, Klay also had a fantastic defensive IQ and certainly had a great ability to play the passing lanes and just get some poke steals like that as well. And when you looked at Klay's game overall offensively and defensively, it was pretty clear that he was one of the more elite players we had in the league. But with Klay Thompson expected to return around Christmas time, the real question is, could we expect Klay Thompson to be the same old Klay Thompson we always knew pre-injury, or will Klay Thompson be a completely different player once he comes back from injury? So I think initially when Klay Thompson comes back for the Warriors, he's not obviously going to be the same player he was pre-injury. It's going to take him some time, maybe a few months, maybe a month, maybe a few weeks, who knows how long that would actually take. But it's pretty clear it's probably going to take him some time to get to the point that he was pre-injury if he ever were effort to get to that point. Whenever a player comes back from basically any injury after being out for an extended period of time, it always takes them some time once they actually return to the court to fully feel comfortable out there and become the player they were previous, if they ever could do so. And especially when you talk about a guy like Klay Thompson, who not only went through an ACL injury, but also went through an Achilles injury back to back, and basically hasn't played an NBA game in over 2 years, it's most likely going to take him some time to feel comfortable once coming back. But to answer the question if I think Klay will ever become the same player that he was prior to all these injuries, I think it's certainly a possibility. On the offensive side, I think it's pretty likely that Klay will be the same shooter that he was previous. I don't necessarily think all those knee injuries and that Achilles injury would necessarily affect his shooting ability, but something that I could see it affecting is of course his ability to drive all the way to the basket and clearly dunk over players. I don't necessarily know if he's going to be able to do that going forward, but that wasn't necessarily a big part of his game anyways in the past, so I don't think that's going to be a huge deal. The thing that I think would be a bigger deal for Klay going forward is I don't necessarily know if he would have the same ability to create for himself offensively, which again, I know he didn't necessarily do that much for the Warriors previous, but it definitely was a nice aspect within his game. So that's something I'm not 100% sure if he could do going forward after all these injuries. That's something that we're going to have to see going forward. But where I think Klay is going to be affected most is on the defensive side. So before in the video, I mentioned Klay was one of the best defenders we have in the NBA and always guards the opposing team's best player. But of course that requires a lot of lateral quickness and just a lot of athleticism in general. But after those two major injuries that Klay went through, I'm not necessarily sure he's going to be the same guy athletically now that he was in the past. So if Klay loses a ton of athleticism once coming back for the Warriors, I don't necessarily think he's going to be as good of a defender as he was previous. So if that were to be the case and Klay loses a ton of athleticism and isn't as good on the defensive side as he was previous, I still think Klay would be a very good player and a very valuable player. I just don't necessarily think he would be as good as he was pre-injury. But of course this is all hypothetical. Maybe Klay comes back and he has all his athleticism for the most part and still is a really good NBA defender, offensively still has the ability to create for himself. Of course that could happen and he would be the same player as he was previous and maybe even get a little bit better. But it's pretty hard to determine whether Klay will or will not be the same player once returning from all these injuries. History would probably suggest that Klay won't be the same player, but we'll see what happens going forward with Klay Thompson, and hopefully for his sake and the Warriors' sake, he's the same player as he was previous and maybe even gets a little bit better. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you guys think Klay Thompson will be the same player once he returns from his injuries, or do you think he won't be? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out guys.
Dosage. Oh yeah, I work with the medics. I'm about to get you injected. I got a couple connections so I can get you prosthetics. Hope you can't go where I'm headed.